Hey, it's Dave here. In this video, I'm taking a look at the Frixos projector clock, a smart clock that can display things like dashboards and your continuous glucose readings, pulling data from Nightscout, Freestyle, Libre or Dexcom. I'll start with a quick overview of what I think of it, then walk you through the setup, Home Assistant integration, and finish with a real automation to show you how you might actually use it day to day. Now, just to make you aware, this was sent to me as a free sample, but as always, I'll keep this honest and unbiased. So this is a 3D printed ESP32 based mini projector. It feels solid and well put together. It projects a clock display on your wall or ceiling, along with things like the weather, your blood glucose readings once your CGM data is connected, and it also has a built-in light sensor so it can automatically adjust the brightness based on the room, which is especially useful at night when you don't want it lighting up everything. It's essentially a smart clock where you can customize the theme and update the scrolling text to show what you want. And if you're using Home Assistant, you can integrate it using a long-lived access token, which lets you control the settings without logging into the web portal, and even update the scrolling text automatically through automations. One thing I really like about this is you're not restricted to a physical screen. You can project it on the wall or even the ceiling. For me personally, I keep this in my bedroom and mainly use it at night to check my blood glucose readings. What I really like is it doesn't light up the whole room or become distracting. It's just there when you need it. And projecting onto the ceiling is actually a bigger deal than it sounds. I've used bedside displays before, but if you're lying the wrong way or half asleep, the last thing you want to do is lean over to the other side to check it. With this, you can just turn your head and it's right there. It sounds minor, but honestly, if you're lazy like me, it makes a big difference. And while, yes, you can just grab your phone to check your blood glucose readings, how many times have you picked up your phone to do one thing and before you know it, you've been scrolling through social media for 45 minutes and now your sleep's completely disrupted? Setup is pretty straightforward. Just plug in a USB-C cable, connect to the Frixos Wi-Fi access point, add your home network details, and you're ready to start configuring it. Now, before we jump into this, I'm not going to cover setting up Nightscout or sharing your data from Libre or Dexcom. That's a full video on its own. I'll assume you've already got that part sorted and just show you how to link your CGM data to the Frixos portal. Once you've got the device connected to your Wi-Fi, from settings, I'm going to uncheck temperature in Fahrenheit because in my region I use Celsius. I'm just going to click Save. Before I go through some of the UI settings that you might want to tweak, I'm going to start off from integration and get the CGM side of things working. So if you select integrations, and if I just scroll down, you'll see there's 3 options you can choose from. So you can either use a Dexcom, Freestyle Libre, or Nightscout URL. I've got these 2 options, the Freestyle Libre, and I've got a Nightscout Pro subscription. So I'm going to show you both options. Assuming you've already set up your Libre link up to share data, you're going to check one of these drop-down menus for your relevant region. Now, while I am actually in the UK, which would classify as Europe, I had to select global rest of the world for this to work. You're going to get some sort of a pop-up about username or password is required. And what you want to do is put in your email address and password here. And then once you've entered those details, you're going to click Save. Once you have saved that, you then want to scroll up and select the Status tab. I'm just going to quickly update my values to true values and then transition to the Status tab. Now, I may have to blur out some of this because it does reveal sensitive information in the logs. But what you're wanting to look for is any error messages that relates to connections, and it should also reference your glucose readings. You can see here it's got CGM glucose value NA, but that will change shortly. I'd give it a few minutes, and what should happen is under integration status, it's going to show your blood glucose readings. So now you can see it's got a glucose reading, so we know the integration from the Freestyle Libre is working. I'm just going to go back a step and do exactly the same, but using the Nightscout URL. So if we go back to integrations, and then scroll down, and this time you're going to paste in your Nightscout URL, which will look something like this. And before you click save, in this password section here, you'll need to enter your API key or password. It does vary based on the Nightscout URLs you're using. In this example, I've got Nightscout Pro and I'm pasting in my API key. So you'll add that into here and then you'll click save. Once you've done that, you scroll back up and you're going to click on status. I'm just going to quickly update those to true values and then go to the status tab. So now I can see it's got Nightscout is set to active, and again it's showing the CGM glucose readings. So we know that's working before we proceed to any of the next steps. If you had typed that in incorrectly, somewhere in the system logs it would reference some form of an HTTP error. Now that we've got that working, we're going to go into some of the other settings. So if we go to advanced, this is more of a personal preference, but some of these settings I prefer to change. Rotation display you may need to change based on the rotation you've set your projector. Now there's a setting here called disable breathing time slots. What this does is the dots between the hours and the minutes animate. Personally, I prefer it to be turned off so it's a static image. So I'm going to check that box. And if you just scroll down a bit further, for location settings, I'm going to enter my latitude, longitude, and time zone settings. Something to warn you is when you're pasting in those first two values, they can't be any greater than 11 characters. If you do make them longer, it will fire up an error message and it will be very clear, but I'm just going to paste the values in now. And for time zone, if you just click on this link here, it actually gives you a list of all the different time zones and what the key is you'll need to copy. So in my example, I'm going to be pasting in this one. Now for Wi-Fi active hours, I would leave it as it is. It's really more of a power saving setting. So perhaps if you were using a battery, it would just save yourself on the usage. But when you set this, it will stop your CGM readings from updating because it's got no wireless. And you won't be able to connect to the web interface either until it's within that time range. So if you do start tinkering with this and you now can't connect to it, just unplug and plug the power lead back in. You'll then be able to get to the web interface and just set it back to 0 and 0. Something to watch out for here where it's got automatic dimmings. The way it determines day and night is based on the light lux readings. And it will default to day being 16 lux or more. And it's also got this light sensitivity option as well. And it states it quite clearly here that the day brightness is the threshold plus sensitivity and the dark brightness is the threshold minus the sensitivity. You're going to want to tinker around with this. I'm just going to open up another tab so I can leave this existing page open. What you'll want to do is scroll up and click on status, and it's going to reveal the light lux setting. So by using that setting, you're then going to want to tinker these so you can find out what the sweet spot is when the lights are turned on and when the lights are turned off. I haven't quite got the perfect setting because during the different times of the day, the natural light also has some influence. And something to watch out for with this is based on the angle you're aiming the projector, it does have a little bit of backlight burn onto the light sensor, which can actually give false readings. So if, for example, you've got it looking something like this, you may want to change the angle in the opposite direction so that the light doesn't backburn onto the sensor. Because when I turned off the lights, it didn't switch to night mode because the projector's backlight was hitting the light sensor and making it think it's still daytime. I'm just going to change mine to 1 and 0.5. This is just for my current setup and not yours, so don't copy this. You'll have to find out what it is yourself. And for night brightness, I actually set it to 5 because when I've got all the lights off, I really don't need it to be 30. I find that's a little bit of an overkill. So I'll leave that as that. Now I'm going to scroll down. By default, the scrolling message is going to show this value. I'm just going to delete all of these, and don't worry if you forget what they are because it says the default values here that you can just copy and paste. One thing I do like about this is instead of having to know these values and then type them in, you can actually just click on them and you'll see that as I click on these settings, they're pre-populating. Something to watch out for is there's no spaces in between them. So if you just click on them and press space, and you can also press enter if you want it to be onto a new line, but I wouldn't go any more than 2 because it's going to come outside the screen area. Now you'll notice here you've got the glucose readings. While this one here does actually show more values, when it's being saved, it's going to scroll and look something like this. Personally, I'm not a fan of that. I would much rather just have a static image that I can see straight away. So I'm going to get rid of that value and I'm going to add this one here, and then it will look something along the lines like this. But it's a little extra personal preference. What I like to have is I'm just going to add a space and then specify the units afterwards. I just think that looks quite nice and it's not distracting now. So we're going to save those settings. Now, if I just scroll back up and we're going to go back into integrations. This is another personal preference, but because I've got the blood glucose readings under the message section, you'll see there's this option here where it's got alternate time CGM. What that does is every 25 seconds, it's going to show the time on the clock, and then for 5 seconds, it's going to show your CGM readings. But because I've already got that as a text underneath, I don't really see the purpose of that. So what I'm going to do is change that setting where it's got CGM sex to 0. And that way, when I save it, the clock will just permanently say the time. And if I want my glucose readings, it's already showing in the text section underneath. You might want to have it where they're both maybe set at 10 seconds or both at 5, just so you can see it a bit quicker. But when you want to find out what your sugar levels are, I don't want to have to wait, look at the clock and wait 25 seconds before it shows. I want the readings immediate. So now you're just going to save those settings again, and you should now have your projector set up and looking something like this. Now I'm going to cover the Home Assistant integration, which is split into 2 parts. First, I'll show you how to generate a long-lived access token and expose your Home Assistant entities to the Frixos clock, so you can reference things like sensor values in the scrolling text. Then in the second part, I'll install the HACS integration, which lets Home Assistant take full control of the projector. So we'll start in the web interface by generating the long-lived access token. Back into the web interface, if you go to integrations, and it's this section here where you'll need to add your Home Assistant web URL and create a long-lived access token. You can actually click on this link, which will take you to some instructions how to do that, which is actually pretty good. So we're going to go into Home Assistant to create this long-lived token. And if you just scroll down, select your account, go to the security tab here, and then scroll down and select create token. And I'm just going to give it a name, then click create token, and just make sure you have definitely copied this, because once you close this window, you won't be able to get that token key, but you can always just create another one if you have lost it. Now I'm going to close that window and go back into the Frixos web portal, paste in that token, And for the server URL, you might be able to type it exactly as it's showing from the example text. But because I've got two environments, I'm going to type in the IP address. And just make sure you either include HTTP or HTTPS because it will throw up an error message otherwise. So mine's going to look like that. And then just scroll down to the bottom of the page and click Save. Now we're going to go to the Advanced tab. And if you scroll all the way down, we're going to add one of the Home Assistant entities to this message section here. So I'm just going to delete what's already there. And if you click on this example where it's got HA entity ID path, we need to edit this particular section here to be the Home Assistant entity ID. So if I go back into Home Assistant, go to Settings, and look for Developer Tools. Depending on your version, it might still be somewhere in this area, but because I've got the February 2026 version, they've now decided to move Developer Tools here. Then click on States, and I'm just going to do a search for daily steps. This is something I've got on one of my smartwatches, so I'm going to click on that. And I'm just going to copy this entity ID. Now I'm going to go back into the Frixos web portal. And I'm just going to overwrite this particular section of the entity ID. So it should look something like this. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to add some text at the beginning to say steps, and space. That way it will say steps and then tell me my step count. Now, just before I click Save, I'm just going to overlay the projection screen because when you are using Home Assistant Entity ID values, I find it takes about a minute before it starts working. So if you think it hasn't worked, just give it a minute for the Entity ID values to show. So now I'm going to click Save. And at the moment, what it's showing is the text side where it's got steps, and space. And shortly, in about a minute's time, it should then show my steps value. And that's good. You can now see it's showing my step count from Home Assistant. If you did want to adjust the refresh interval, if I just go back a step and go back into integrations, there is a section here where it's got refresh every 1 minute. I would just leave it as it is, as that's already more than quick enough. Now I'm going to install the Frixos HACS integration. This will allow Home Assistant control of the projection clock. From Home Assistant, if you go into HACS, and if you just do a search for Frixos, and you should see this projection clock as the option. Click on that. Then select Download and click Download again. Once that's installed, if you go into Settings, Devices and Services, and then click Add Integration and do a search for Frixos. Click on that, and it's just going to ask for the host. You can probably get away with just typing the host name. If for some reason you do have to type in the IP address and you don't know the IP, the easiest way to get the IP address is just turn off the projector, turn it back on, because when it boots up, it actually reveals the IP address on the screen. So I'm going to leave the port and the name as they are and click Submit. For the area, I'm going to change it to bedroom and then click Finish. And now all of those settings, which you can change from the web interface, Home Assistant now has access to view the values and change those settings. If I just scroll back up again a little bit further, one which is going to be quite useful is you've got this scrolling message section here. At the moment, it's just got my daily steps. but I could trigger an automation so when a certain event happens, I could actually receive a message on my projector, which I'll be doing later on in this video. I'm now going to create an automation that changes the scrolling text to remind me to empty the trash every Wednesday morning between 7:30 and 8:30. The only problem is that the scrolling message replaces my normal glucose readings, so I'll also adjust the clock so it toggles between the time and the glucose readings every 5 seconds while that reminder is active. Then after 8:30, the automation will revert everything back to normal. From Home Assistant, if you go into Settings, Automations and Scenes, and select Create Automation, create New Automation, and if you click on these 3 dots here and select Edit in YAML, I'm just going to paste in this example code, which I will be sharing. Starting from the top, you've got the 2 triggers. From 7:30 on a Wednesday, it's going to set the trigger ID to 1, and at 8:30 on a Wednesday, it's going to set the trigger ID to 2. Then you've got 2 conditions. The first one is when trigger ID is set to 1, and it's going to set the input text value of the scrolling message to "Don't forget to take out the trash," and it's also going to set number of alternate time display duration and alternate CGM display duration to the value of 5 seconds. The reason I want it to do that is while it's showing the message alerts, I'll no longer be able to see my blood glucose readings, so instead I just want the clock to toggle every 5 seconds where it shows the readings that way instead. And the second condition, where trigger ID is set to 2, is essentially doing the reverse. So it's going to set the text value to scrolling message back to CGM readings. Then it's going to set the number of CGM display to 0, and it's also going to set the alternate time display duration to 25. Now there is one issue with this particular part here, is that numeric values can only be set between 1 and 300 due to the way the HACS integration was set up. However, once I've saved this automation, I'm going to show you how to fix that. Just to show you the UI setup, if you click on these 3 dots here and select Edit in Visual Editor, you can see here, this is the 2 triggers, 7:30 on a Wednesday and 8:30 on a Wednesday. Then you've got the conditions, if trigger 1 or if trigger 2. And if I just click on that, you can see it's got set value, scrolling message, and then it's got the set numbers. And if I go to option 2, it's doing the reverse, set value to scrolling message, and it's individually setting the number of the alternate CGM display and time display duration, because one is going to be set of the value of 0 and the other is going to be set of the value of 25. Now I'm going to save those changes, and I'm going to leave the name as it is and select rename. And now we've got that automation set up. Now in terms of the entity ID values you'll need to find and change in this automation for it to work for yourself, I'm just going to open up another tab and go to that device. So if you go to Settings, Devices and Services, and then just do a search for Frixos. And then click on that. And if I just scroll down, you've got the scrolling message section here. So you're going to need that entity ID. And if I just go down a little bit further, you've got these 2 settings as well. So you've got alternate time display, that's the entity ID, and you've got CGM display duration, and that's the entity ID as well. Now regarding that problem where you can't change the alternate time display for the CGM, I'm going to show you the problem and then I'm going to show you the fix. So from this Frixos integrations page, if I scroll down, you'll see here, I've got the value of time in seconds to 25, and I've got the value of the CGM as 0. However, if I go back into Home Assistant, you'll see this can only be set between 1 and 300, so I can move the arrows up to go above, but if I try to go down, it limits to 1, and if I try to manually type in 0, you're going to get this error message where the duration is out of valid range and it needs to be set between 1 and 300. I'm now going to show you how to fix that. So from File Editor, if you go to Custom Components, and then go to Frixos, and look for a file called number.py. Then you're going to scroll about halfway down the page, and look for this section of code where it's got alternate CGM display duration. And you'll see here it's got native minimum value 1 and maximum value 300. So what we're going to do is change that to 0. It's possible you might want to do the same here and also set this to 0, but for my example, I want it so the time is permanently on and the CGM display is not. And if one of them is set to 0, the other one will always work. So we're just going to change this one, but in case you wanted it where maybe you didn't ever want the time to display, you may want to change this value to 0, and then you can set this to a value so that the CGM display is always on. Once you've made that change, we're now going to save it, and you're going to need to restart Home Assistant for the changes to apply. So if you go to Settings, Developer Tools, just before we give it a restart, I'll just show you that error message again, because if I do it from the Actions tab, if I try to perform an action, you'll see I've got that error message, and I'm going to show you that after we've restarted. So from YAML, I'm just going to check the configuration's all good, give it a restart, and we'll see how it works. Now that Home Assistant has restarted, I'm just going to go back into Settings, Developer Tools, and go to the Actions tab, and I'm going to run that action again. And this time there's no error messages because we've made that change to the code in the HACS integration. So just to demo this automation, you can see the scrolling text that says don't forget to take out the trash, and then you've got the clock which is toggling every 5 seconds between the time and my blood sugar readings. And then when it gets to 8:30, the automation is going to revert the settings where the clock remains static and the blood sugar reading is underneath at the text section. So overall, this is a really nice little device, especially if you're using a continuous glucose monitor or CGM, as that's really what it's designed for. The Home Assistant integration is a nice bonus on top, letting you take it further with things like automations and custom messages. Let me know your thoughts on this device in the comments section, and would you actually use something like this? And if you're into smart home automation videos, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.